And you have lots of news items on your Twiland blog, and I tell people sign up, and it's a subscription blog. Get that information because you're not going to find it on the blogosphere on the regular internet. With this special blog, you have put all of the very powerful and important science people need to know with lots of references. So it's not speculation. Let's go through some of the top stories today, and there's some very interesting issues that we can explore once we open up these cans of worms.
Well, I want to talk about this article from the Telegraph in Britain. They've done a research, and there was a lot of money lent to Russian banks, and some of it disappeared, and some people were killed.
How long ago was this? Were the loans placed, and how recent were the killings?
In 2010, the supervisor at the bank where a Mr. Parapolischny was
tongue twister
working. Yeah, he died, and they knew about the money being skimmed by some of the rich oligarchs in Russia, and so he took some information with him, and he immigrated to England, in London, with his family, his wife and 2 children. And because he thought that, well, my boss died, maybe I better get out of here. And so he went over to Britain, and he stayed there until 2013.
Right.
And when he was enticed back to Paris, and he had, in the meantime, he had brought the information out with him, and the documents that he brought formed the basis for a criminal investigation by Swiss prosecutors into the alleged crime syndicate. And even our president pushed through a law, the Magnitsky Act, and that was the man that was killed over there, leading to the freezing of assets of 18 individuals linked to the fraud and conviction and connected to Mr. Magnitsky's death. So it was one of his subordinates that brought that information out, and so people want to know, well, where'd the money go? And they think these 18 individuals may have taken it, or taken some of it, a lot of it maybe. Anyway, it wasn't used in the banking system for the building of infrastructure or whatever the reason that they had given for needing the loan. And his name is Mr. Browder. So he lived in London, and then in 2013 he went to Paris. Now, before he went to Paris, he had taken out a large life insurance policy. So the insurance company had knew his background, but they checked his health, and his health was good, and so they didn't think anything. They went ahead and issued him the policy, life insurance policy. Well,
right.
What happened was he went over to Paris, and he was over there for 2 or 3 days. He stayed at hotels, and they think that he met with the man who killed Litvinenko. Remember Litvinenko? Litvinenko,
yeah.
Yeah, he was killed by polonium by an assassin from the KGB.
Right,
And when they got to looking into the death of Mr. Magnitsky, they discovered that his name kept coming up. So,
yeah, and of course, polonium is one of the components of red mercury, which is used for making micronukes as well. So the Russians are one of the major producers, as well as the Israelis, Americans, and the French that have micronukes.
Yeah. So Litvinenko, and so he was poisoned when he was in London. So
right.
So this Mr. Browner, he went over to Paris, and I think that what they're speculating is that the KGB had told him that they wanted to resolve the matter, or maybe the bankers wanted to resolve the matter, and so he went over there thinking that he would be safe. Well, he came home from that. He was 44 years old, and the insurance company said he was in good health. When he came home, he said he didn't feel good. And so he said, well, I'm going to take a jog and see if I can't get my head clear. He took a jog, he came home, he collapsed, and he died. Now,
I guess his head didn't clear.
Yeah, the UK police said that he died of sudden adult death syndrome. Now, we don't have sudden adult death syndrome anyplace.
Well, we have KGB-itis. Well, I want to make I want to make a statement here, and I've said this in pieces before, but I want to make it real plain to people that might think otherwise. And this is not like something that I just will defend. I will defend like an animal defending their little cubs. The Soviet Union never went away. This is an entire fraud. The fall of the Soviet Union was created as an external fraud for the globalists to try to fool the West and to integrate former CIS nations into NATO, which they've done, and eventually to have a resurgence of Russia, which is happening right now because we're doing nothing. We protest. It's almost like having a fit over a wife beat her husband that bangs out some of your right teeth, and then the next day bangs out some of your left teeth, and say, if you keep doing out my teeth, I'm going to leave you. But he said, you still have some teeth. The husband says, okay? So what I'm trying to tell people out there is don't believe the lie. The globalists want a big bad Russia. We even shipped technology and nuclear materials to Russia to make sure they got nuclear weapons. We even had the nation of It's a Real Hell, Israel, to make sure that Israel passed on to Russia and China targeting technology, nuclear weapons, and advanced supercomputers to make sure our competing enemies had technology to at some future date to make a possible thermonuclear or cybernetic war exchange with these other powers that we created actually out of thin air, because it was created by the transnational corporations and the big banks. Mao Zedong got his weapons made in Britain for the Chinese Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution was completely run by the British secret police, MI6, okay, the people that were the precursors to MI6. What people should understand is that everything in history is a fraud. Everything. And this thing about when you're seeing these agents die, it's because Putin is like a mafia don. The best way to describe would be a beast dictator. He's very intelligent. He doesn't drink vodka. He's very clever, and the globalists are letting him run loose. They could literally tomorrow put a clamp on his $40 billion in the banks and put the end in Putin's fun games. They don't want to. They want Putin on a long leash, not a short leash, a long leash. They want to have the dialectic of building up nuclear weapons. They want Russians knocking off people so we can kind of spy on them. But we're also pipelining information to these maniacs, okay? So don't think that this game is like a single-level chess. It's multi-level space chess, where the devils in our globalist government want to make damn sure our enemies have enough weapons to kill us. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Nasty. Nasty, nasty, nasty. People say, well, I can't understand that. I said, because you don't have a demonic mind. My mind is such that I can actually wrap my mind around the craziness of these people and just say what it is. That's why you'll see a lot of people that call themselves Christians and are not. A lot of them, the Jews, are Kabbalist warlocks and wizards. What you have to understand is our politicians at the highest levels are all high-level Masons, and all high-level Masons are all bisexual pedophiles. Period. All. Not some. All. And what people need to understand is all these high-level religions are also bisexual pedophiles, whether it's the Dalai Lama, right, if you actually delve into it, or the Pope. Why do you think he's saying all the things he says, okay? Why do you think they're not disciplining the so-called priest class that are in cardinals and so on that are actually having an institutionalized bisexuality? Guess what? It's part of a ceremony. It's inside. It's part of the guts of what they are. So Russia never went away. When Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, guess what? It was a scam. As I said before, it's scamtastic. Scamtastic. And before Professor comes on, let's go through some of the rest of these stories. You got some really neat pictures here too, and you've done a really good job in your blog. You have the questions in bold. Talk about Dugway. In fact, we kind of made a joke on the break that Dugway Proving Ground should be called the new Broadway play, Dugway Proving Ground. It's going to be called the Plausible Deniability on Broadway. Plausible deniability. How's that?
Well, it was the only one of the 4 laboratories that can produce inactivated anthrax that didn't produce inactivated anthrax. And so it's stuck out there in the middle of the desert in Utah. So it's a long way from the halls of power. The other three are right outside of Washington, D.C. And if you were going to send an inspector around to check on things, you wouldn't want to send him out to Utah. His family wouldn't be happy. He wouldn't be happy. And so probably they didn't have as many inspections out there.
Right.
And it's kind of hidden in the vast desert of Utah. And so I'm thinking that maybe there were laboratories that didn't really want inactivated strains. You know, maybe they really wanted something that was still active, and so they would ask Dugway to.
Wonder why they would do that, though. I mean, I was at the Federal Center in Denver. They were doing all kinds of experiments. The original experiments on anthrax were done in Colorado. They weren't done in Dugway Proving or elsewhere. And they were messing around with these things 50, 60 years ago with anthrax. And they had stockpiles of it there in Colorado. And when they did their experiments, you know, there's lots of technologies for weaponizing it. One of the simplest is simply add fabric softener so that little spores won't clump together, so you get a greater what's called inoculum ratio. So you don't need 80 spores to infect someone rather than 80,000, so it gets to the respiratory bronchioles.
Yeah.
But this is criminal activity, and the fact is they've discovered these, you mentioned, which I couldn't believe, it's like a comedy. The turntable inside this radiation box wasn't turning. So you get non-uniform radiation of the samples, and then they ship it all over the world without validating that the spores are not infective, because you'd think of it a multi-dose, you know, proving that this is safe to transport to non-BSL-4 labs. They actually proved that the spores were not infected before they ship it, because do they really want to weaponize the anthrax explosion at these different military sites or getting out of containment? Maybe, yeah. Maybe these idiots in the government, remember, since 9/11, they've amplified the number of BSL-4, 3, and 2 labs all across America, and most don't have certifying equipment or staff to actually handle these. The same way as when they brought in these people from Liberia, they didn't have the type of medical facilities to handle the people with the kind of airborne nastiness of Ebola, which isn't very well airborne. But if you have an airborne super pathogen like a weaponized flu or SARS, you're going to kill a lot of people. In fact, we did a simulation in Denver, and we proved that we could not contain a release in an airborne sprayer at the second floor window of 17th Avenue, downtown Denver, and that in our war game simulation with the FBI and CDC, which I personally participated in, we killed everybody. We killed everyone. We were phenomenally unsuccessful.
Well, we know how successful the anthrax attacks were after 2001. After the World Trade Center fell.
Well, guess what our simulation was on? It was weaponized anthrax in a simulation. It wasn't real anthrax. It was water vapor shot out of the second floor apartment window on 17th Avenue to the people below. And we were simulating having people, hazmat officers, go into the big hospitals like Presbyterian, St. Luke's, and St. Joe's, telling them their symptoms, and then the emergency department and the hazmat people at the hospitals were supposed to back calculate that there was either a radiological or biological weapons release, like a dirty bomb or a biological weapons release. And guess what? The system didn't work. We killed everybody.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of preparation since then. The hospitals are showing a little bit more spunk when it comes to letting people in who may be contagious, for instance. Yeah,
well, guess what? I gave them a specific list to the hazmat teams and the FBI and CDC director, personally, face-to-face with the national director. I did. And I got none of those things answered when I asked them questions in March of 2001, 6 months before 9/11. These guys were giddy after I was asking them questions like a bunch of devils, not answering my straight face-to-face questions at a private dinner at the Adams Mart Hotel. And I'm not talking about minor guys. I'm talking about the national FBI and CDC directors for bioterrorism. I sat there with the head of infectious disease from the University of Colorado, and I'm not pleased. I'm going to say right now, you don't have anybody as qualified as me who has been in the place that I've been, who's seen what I've seen, and is more pissed than I am about the incompetence of our government and our biological weapons facilities and their ability to transport either sick people like from Liberia or to handle any kind of thing like a biological weapon. And these idiots will have probably battalions of toxic vaccines they're going to mandate under martial law to force vaccinate us to say it's going to save us. No, it's not. Just like Richard Pan, who, by the way, I signed up to be one to bring on the SB 277 recall of Dr. Pediatrician Idiot, grinning moron, Dr. Richard Pan, and also to recall Governor Jerry Brown Moonbeam, who thinks there's, quote, good science. Where did he get his qualifications to indicate there's good science? Would he like to debate me face-to-face? Not likely. Would other of these morons like to listen to the $3.5 billion of money spent, given back to parents in the last 20 years for injuries to the vaccine court because they won't let direct lawsuits go against the vaccine companies? Well, you guarantee if there's a biological weapon release, these morons are going to have tons of vaccines to give you, because I took care of troops that were given the Bioport vaccine out of Michigan, and I can't tell you, it's like they were shot across the room. One guy told me in Special Forces like being kicked by a donkey, and he couldn't sleep for a week. If he breathed deep, it felt like there were lightning bolts jumping from one eye to the other. That's how bad it was. And if you think I'm pissed, that's not even a good enough word for it. I am so angry about our government incompetence and our medical system and our biological weapons systems and their idiots who want to force vaccinate us and their idea of martial law. These people are masters of chaos. And you need to know out there that we're dealing with people that are, I can't tell you whether they're just stupid or evil, or on a good day, both.
Well, this thing with the anthrax, they knew this machine wasn't working. The company that sold it to them knew it wasn't working. Somebody in the Pentagon bought it because they went to DOD.
It's the reason why we have an F-13 that can't fight dogfight, an F-16 made in the 1970s, because we have this giant platform for firing missiles at a distance that couldn't do a dogfight with a MiG-29I from the 1970s from Russia, or owned still by Turkey. We're idiots, and we make an airplane that costs $145 million to make an airplane, which should have cost maybe 20 or 30 million, and it's a piece of junk. And the same thing with our biological weapons system. We're not prepared to go to war or do anything. And if we ever had a biological weapons attack or a cyber attack or a dirty bomb attack, our country will collapse like a house of cards, like a Jenga stick game. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, when I was in an inspection out on one of the projects that I worked on, I told them, I said, there's a difference between price and cost, because they were choosing by price. They were choosing the lowest priced equipment. And they
had accountants there with a sharp pencil, right?
Yeah, and I said, no, you need to look at the cost of that. That thing's only going to last 2 years. This other one will last 4 years.
Right. So I told them they needed to have decon showers at every hospital in the country. They need to have hazmat facilities to help people that have been contaminated with a biological, radiological pathogen. I told them a whole series of things they needed to do, and not one of the things I recommended were done by the government. Not one. Just a couple of few things we want to mention here. The Upper Mississippi River, there's a notice to mariners. You mentioned to Ann and your blog, which is Twiland. The northern jet stream is still totally screwed up. That's really not working properly. And, of course, you put up also the global sea surface temperature, which, Professor McKenna, you gave a very good thesis about how the plasma physics of ion transfer from the upper ionosphere to the water actually does the heating. It's not solar heating from the sun. It's a plasma physics effect. And, boy, does that ever, in the middle sections of the Earth's waterways around the world, have heated up amazingly. This El Nino year is weird. And, of course, the global geowarming. I talked to Dane Wigington, who's one of the chief proponents fighting against geoengineering of the world climate. And, of course, Dane has heard my presentations, because I took care of pilots flying out of Buckley and Peterson that were putting up the nanoparticles in the upper atmosphere, so I know the classified research on why these idiots were doing it. And there were basically 4 reasons they were told. Some of them are probably lies. First was to block coronal mass ejections and to prevent what we call climate catastrophes. The second was to actually geoengineer the weather to try to counteract extreme weather fluctuations, which, by the way, they're doing a piss poor job. It's really a catastrophe what they're doing, because they're drying out the West, they're drying out Sao Paulo, Brazil, and every Middle Eastern country that's come in opposition to us. We've literally dehydrated down to drought and disaster. And, of course, the nanoparticles are killing the bees. We've now proven that the bees are not just dying of neonicotinoid pesticides, which they've taken away in Europe. It's nanoparticles, and it doesn't matter if those nanoparticles are inserted not over your country like China, which we don't have flights over China. The Dyson sphere effect is that if they insert them at 73 to 80,000 feet, they spread out over the entire planet and are screwing up all the biology of all living things. So thank you, globalist maniacs. You are totally screwing up the world, and you're killing us. So, Professor McKinney, let's get into some of the stuff that you talked about. We have the wing generator program. You have a new video up now, too, right?
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. It was a little bit long in getting there, but the wing generator fundraising project ends Monday night at midnight. So if people have not donated yet, please go there. But yeah, there's a new video. It gives people a very good concept of the wing generator. There's a lot of engineering that doesn't come through.
Okay, I have a very tough question, and kind of I call my best 3-year-old question. Why would you stop the fundraising? I mean, I would think a week and now, 2 weeks from now, you still want money to be donated. Why would you stop it on Monday?
No, it's the rule of the thing. If you don't hit your limit, which I had put like 50,000 as my limit, if you don't reach it, then it ends after 60 days. And so, unfortunately,
who made those rules?
Well, that's this Indiegogo site.
Indiegogo has a kind of a rule. They're like like the god of the universe setting the laws of gravity and plasma physics, and they said we are the god of fundraising.
The god of
60 days. Yeah, they're the fundraising god. Okay.
But I can put it somewhere else. That doesn't mean it's going to end completely.
Yeah, but Indiegogo can be go-go. It can go.
Yeah, but the other part is I don't get any money until it ends, and so that's the good part. Is then
that'll help some money to actually start building some of the things like our generator here for Southern California, and getting ready to have other Sentinel sites, because this is not alternative energy. This is replacement energy. This is going to replace the grid, replace the power grid, because the most sensitive thing that we have in our society, and the most dangerous thing, is not international plagues, it's not even Fukushima. It's the fact that when the power grid goes, Western civilization is gone. Not just going, it's gone. Literally instantly, within days, it'll decay to something where the Stone Age will look like the Sandals Resort compared to it.
Well, yeah. I just, oddly enough, saw myself on TV last night. And a couple of years ago, I did a History Channel special on the Hopi prophecies, which I thought was interesting. And
tell us about that, because that's we had an interesting discussion last time you were on about the fact that the Dr. Harrington's work, you literally replicated and proved that in fact it was a Hale-Bopp comet, which is a 4 Earth mass size comet that Dr. Harrington discovered, which of course you can use as a visual telescope. You can't if it's a dwarf star, you can only see it with X-ray telescopes or a pi meson scope below the ice shelf of Antarctica, or a X-ray telescope in space like Chandra. So you did some interesting things. What about these prophecies? What did you find?
Well, that was a few years ago. My most recent work, which is now available on my webpage, it's called the Harrington Hale-Bopp Art Bell Coast to Coast AM. This is an extremely complex story, but it's a 4-hour lecture.
Right.
1 hour is on my show last week, July 23rd. And then the other 3 hours are available on my webpage. But basically, the Hale-Bopp comet was what Harrington discovered, what we later called Hale-Bopp. And so literally he had discovered that in 1991, full 4 years before the official discovery by the Hale and Bopp guys. Right. So at any rate, though, finally I figured out that's why all the craziness, that's why they killed the Heaven's Gate people.
Right, Heaven's Gate was killed because they thought Hale-Bopp was kind of a harbinger of the end of the world, right?
Yeah, and in a sense it was. When it was first discovered, it was on a very near collision course with Earth. It was 4 Earth masses, although it was rather small, so it was a very dense object. It had a companion. and comets are not supposed to have companions. So NASA had a big smear campaign saying that it didn't have a companion. I mean, the whole thing got so goofy, but what I've been able to do is unravel this all by identifying that is in fact what Harrington discovered.
Right.
And he did that in 1991. He comes back to Washington with his data from New Zealand, dies rapidly. His work ends. His assistant, Tom Van Flandern, who prompted the whole thing many years earlier, he's the one that got Harrington to do this. Tom Van Flandern turncoats and starts saying there is no such thing as Planet X, even though Van Flandern's very basic work was that a planet between Mars and Jupiter got blown to smithereens back in ancient history.
They called Tiamat, right? The ancient planet of Tiamat.
Yeah, and so anyway, here's Van Flandern, who started the whole thing, all of a sudden turncoats and says, for the rest of his career, says there's no such thing as Planet X.
Right.
And so,
do you think he was scared by the NSA or some government agency?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In other words, he got terrified into shutting up and turncoating. Yeah.
His boss just got killed, taken out, and Van Flandern was kind of the point man for behind the scenes in a lot of cases for a campaign saying there was no such thing as Planet X. And I think he was providing somewhat of a subtle message, as a lot of people who are threatened do. They try and give out some kind of message. And on his webpage, here he is expounding this idea that the asteroid belt was created by a blown-up planet, which was blown up by an incoming rogue planet. Right. And that's where the asteroid belt comes from. And then he goes, but there's no such thing as Planet X. Well, excuse me, buddy, that's what it's all about.
That's what you just said. And the other thing is, I'm going to quote the U.S. Space Command, because I was one of their doctors for a period of several years back in the mid-'90s. 4% of the large object could cause significant destruction to planet Earth. Only 4% are picked up by U.S. Space Command by their cycle of satellite-based platforms around the Earth looking out into space. They don't pick up a lot of the objects. The one that just whizzed by us a couple little diameters, which is 2.5 miles across a few months ago, they had no idea it was coming in even. No idea. And of course, a lot of these objects have a debris field around them, so you can have objects that maybe the object is 1 lunar mass or 2 lunar diameters away from Earth. Some of their cohorts are actually going to crash right into the Earth. Some of them are as big as a Winnebago, or large enough to destroy Luxembourg. So people don't realize we're in a shooting gallery here, and the asteroid belt is an example of something really bad from McKinney back.
Well, yes, this poison that was administered over in apparently it was administered in Paris. So the British government had closed they said there wasn't a murder case. Well, then Paris got a hold of these findings from the insurance company, and they reopened it because they said, well, he was poisoned here in Paris. Right. And what they discovered was that the poison was something that was called evening trumpet flower. And evening trumpet flower is favored by Russian and Chinese assassins, and it's fairly rare in Russia and China because they aren't as low a latitude. They're not as warm as Texas, but you can find it in the Texas Native Plants database.
Really?
So, yes, and it says all parts of the plant are poisonous. Now, what part they used and how they did it and how they administered it, we don't know. But
that's interesting. So
yeah.
They're killing people. So in other words, the spy game is still continuing, despite the fact they try to say the Soviet Union's gone away. We had Professor McKinney talking about Planet X and so on, and we know that there's a hard boundary zone, whether or not it's a specific date or a range of dates or times. But I'm certain that the globalists, the Tier 1 science, knows some very nasty things, whether it's a dwarf star way out in deep space affecting gravitonic waves or the passage of large planet-sized comets. They know there's some large events that are in our future that they're working against, because when these events start to happen, the globalists are going to lose control of the world system, aren't they, Professor McKinney?
Exactly correct. Yeah, that's what I've always told people, and that's why there's so much misinformation going around. That's why
also a lot of unqualified people, and I'm going to mention a few of their names. People like John DiNardo, what's his name, the Sheldon Day. Many people who pick out something like Marshall Masters, and they pull out a piece here and a piece there, and then they make all kinds of outlandish comments of, yeah, the end is coming. Guess what? The end is coming. In fact, it says in the book of Mark, which is the Bible, that lest those days be cut short, no flesh would survive. It's the exact opposite of what you think, just like the rapture. I hear all these idiot pastors, and I challenge any pastor out there who thinks they know Arabic and Hebrew better than me to say that it says one in the field is two is taken. And what Jesus himself says, where the vulture is, that's the Aramaic word, where the vulture is, there is the body. It's not a rapture of good, it's a rapture of evil. And the same thing with Mark. It means that those days are going to be cut off by a galactic and solar event that will cut off the killing fields of the globalists. They're the ones killing, crashing the world economy, geoengineering the weather, screwing up the biosphere, doing all kinds of things like geotectonic events are triggering because they weaponize the planet. It's not God, and it's not even the solar system. These globalists are in a process of trying to reduce the world population 90%, like the Georgia Guidestones of the Rosicrucians. People need to grasp this, that God's going to cut off those days, and he said, lest those days be cut off, no flesh would survive, and the cutting off is going to be a solar and galactic event. In other words, believe it or not, the solar and galactic event that'll seem to be cataclysmic will cut off their killing fields. The exact opposite of what you think.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, the people that are claiming that it's here and thinking they're getting the word out are just idiots.
Well, what they're doing is they're acting as a disinformation ops, because you see, if you want to screw people up, you tell them, well, create a cognitive dissonance. You tell them something, be very afraid, it's here right now. And you say, don't worry, we're nuts. This isn't validated by science. So people just go back to sleep and don't realize at some point, whether it's years or decades away, there are cataclysmic world events that the globalists know are coming, and they're terrified that it's going to cut off their ability to reduce the world population. They want to merge with science and technology. They want genetic engineering to zero senescence. My friend Ron Klatz was over about 3 years ago to the Burj Dubai Hotel in the Middle East. All these billionaires met with him. They wanted to see if they could get the anti-aging life extension senescence technologies, because they want it for themselves. They don't want it for Dr. Deagle or Professor McKinney or Ann Morrison to reverse aging or prevent disease. No. They want to live forever, cybernetically and genetically enhanced and rich, genetically and cybernetically. They want us dead. And if you think they're not going to, when they have people like Richard Pan, this idiot doctor, pediatrician who thinks he knows better than people like me or other doctors and other scientists about force vaccinating a medical assault, when they've already paid out $3.5 billion to children and their parents that were assaulted by vaccines and caused damage here in America alone, when in the last few months they gave $90 million in just 1 year alone in Great Britain, to parents of injured children. You know the globalists are on a rage. They are in a killing rage, and the only thing that's going to cut it off is the solar and galactic event. Because I don't see the population doing it. It's the only thing that's going to cut it off is the solar and galactic event set by God. That's it.
Well, the thing is, people have to understand that these are not always complete mass extinctions.
No, they're going to be disasters. If you know what's coming, you get away from the coast. Just like the animals in the tsunamis that struck, for example, Indonesia, the monkeys and the dogs and cats, they didn't run toward the sea being pulled away. They ran toward the hills. The elephants in these areas, like in Indonesia, they didn't run toward the ocean. They were smart enough animals that they decided, I'm going to start humping it up the side of this hill, because I know when that tsunami hits, all those stupid partiers that are crawling out to the beach and looking at all the fish flipping around on the wet sand, they're going to die when that wave sucks them out and then just hits them with a giant tsunami. And if people have sense, it's very survivable. But the globalists, you see, will lose total control if there's a coronal mass ejection, a gravity wave, or a passing hypergravitonic object like a forest mass Hale-Bopp comet. which you said on the break was probably passing 6,000 years ago when the flood of Noah happened, because we know the floods of the deep, which are the hydroliths, the giant oceans of water below the crust of the earth, burst, as it says right in the Bible, and how the waters of the deep plus the waters above, 40 days of water, rain, would not bring the ship of Noah to the Ararat Mountains. But giant hydroliths of water, oceans of water, released and burst onto the earth would.
Well,
So
what happens is with the rain, the pressure. These are like artesian wells,
Right.
basically, is what happens, and the pressure from above, in the water seeping down, the pressure from above forces the water out, and that's why the water came basically shooting out of the ground. So
Plus
it all
also
makes
the fact
sense.
that the passing gravitonic object would rip apart you'd have what's called a lithospheric disjunction, where the crust of the earth slides in the mantle, and when that happens, it breaks it up. And when it breaks it up, giant oceans of water are released, which is why it's so cataclysmic. We know the earth has slid before in its mantle, that the crust of the earth has slid before. Geologically, that's how, for example, India and the Himalayan mountains were made, when India slammed into southern Asia and created the Himalayan mountains.
Yeah, these are caused by passing objects. The Earth doesn't just jump up and do this by itself.
No, it's passed by gravitonic waves, by hypergravitational object having differential effects on the crust of the Earth and the mantle on one side or the other of the planet. That's how it happens.
Exactly. Yeah. So I encourage people to take a look at my work here. This is, in fact, what I released on July 23rd. It's available on my webpage. It's the only real Planet X update that's worth looking at that has come around in the past, really 20 years.
Right, so all these people are all talking about Planet X, and by the way, it's not just giant comets or planet size. We have 10,000 dwarf stars for every star in our galaxy of 460 billion stars, and only 10% are entrained in even a hyperelliptical orbit. A lot of them are wanderers because their parent star system is long gone. People need to realize that. It's a very vast galaxy, but there's a lot of loose, you want to call it flying cannonballs flying around the galaxy that aren't even entrained into an orbital pattern.
Yeah, there's something I talk about, and this is, you have to understand the need for misinformation coming out of NASA. NASA is nothing more than just anything but the truth. Not a straight answer is what it really means.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Not a straight answer. That's funny. And also, NASA means high and lifted up, which is BS. It's high and lifted up BS.
Yeah.
So check out Twiland, of course, and blog, and check out, of course, jmccsci.com. We have the links directly up to the Wing Generator program. There's a video up there now. The GoGo site will be ending their as I say, the campaign on Monday, but it'll be a new campaign starting. This is a energy replacement system. Don't listen to other so-called pseudo-experts on Planet X. Yes, there's cataclysms in our future. Our God is God, and He's not nervous. He's on the throne. And believe it or not, a galactic and solar event will stop the killing fields, not start it. Interesting, eh?
Absolutely.
Back in Monday, and pray for us, and take care, take wellness, and